landscape ahead, you can start to focus on, how do I get ready for that? What kind of fitness do we need to kind of undertake that scale of journey? And I think that's a really important moment to not despair because not enough's happened, but to recognize that enough has happened for us to understand a lot more about how far yet we have to travel. And that, as a traveler, is invaluable because now we can prepare for that. So the fitness that we need for it, I think I want to speak to that. What kind of fitness do we need given what we can now see is the scale of this journey? So to use the Harvard experience, this is an institution that has been very successful in terms of its levels of commitment emerging, lots of green stuff going on, lots of executive commitment, continuous improvement commitment. Once they've achieved the 30% below 2006, they will reconvene and set their next goal, ending in climate neutrality as soon as they're able. The revolving loan fund, lots of successful peer-to-peer engagement, huge amount of student involvement and culture change that's happened to the point of the institution fully embracing sustainability as an aspect of its identity, which for a 360-year-old university is really a remarkable turn of events to have happened within just an 8-year time frame. And then it's now leveraging those experiences to kind of get into its curriculum and offer some courses. But let's take a look backstage, and I apologize to those of you that have seen this already, but there's no better way to kind of unpack the realities, the day-to-day realities of that journey. This is a small project way back at the beginning, changing light bulbs in the residential dorms, literally T12s, changing them down to thinner, more energy-efficient fluorescents. Very straightforward project. First question was, why do we still have buildings with these inefficient lights? The answer is a systemic answer that the operation staff have been whittled down. We only have enough operation staff to fix things that are broken. We don't have people looking for opportunities to do better practice, generally speaking. This is fairly universal, from corporate sector to higher ed. This is really what's happened with facility management as a trend. So the green crew, we find the project, we go to who we think is, who we're told is the decision maker. The decision maker, we are told, is the person that runs that building. Get that person to sign off and you're good to go. So we go to the decision maker and ask, can we do this project? And the facility director is like, look, I've been wanting to get to stuff like that, but I don't have the capacity to actually do it. So if you could do it, then we've got a conversation. So we're not, sustainability people, we don't know how to do light projects, but we're like, we fake it. Yes, we can do it. We will do it. So then the next question is, okay, well, how do we pay for it? And we're thinking, well, this thing only has a 3-year payback. Surely you pay for it. No, I can't pay for it. My annual maintenance budget is so tiny, it's only enough to fix really critical system failures. Which again is a universal thing from corporate, government, higher ed. This is what's happened. So then the Green Campus Loan Fund is a response to that. We build this loan fund that people can borrow money from, they pay it back with the savings, it's interest free, it cuts through all these finance and accounting barriers that we were incurring. So facility directors, great, yes, you give us the money, you run the project, that sounds like a go. So you are responsible for getting the vendor and making it all happen. So we're like faking it till we make it sort of thing. Then we're about to go, we've got our vendor and the facility director realizes, wait, I've got to pay the loan fund back. That payment back would come from a different budget. That's the finance manager from capital budgets who only says yes to me once a year. I need that yes for this major other thing. You use up one of your yeses. So we go and deploy all of our political capital to try to get this finance manager to approve this idea. It takes a long time to convince them. They eventually come on board with this idea that they would pay the fund back with energy savings that we are going to meter and prove to them are real. So at this point, we've given them the idea, we're doing the project for them, we've given them money, we've got management approval. We're thinking, where I go, but then the building manager pipes up about something, the housemaster freaks out that the new lighting might play off the paint colours differently. The students get wind of this new green thing and want to be involved with it. The maintenance crew start to worry about how do we dispose of new light bulbs. The vendor starts to not follow through. And all of this stuff, we're having to navigate all of these interactions and issues, and it's a 3-month process to get the definitive answer of how many people at Harvard does it take to change a light bulb. It's also the iconic sort of metaphor for what it is like to bring about change in an organization. When you try to change an organization, you're brought into contact with its true nature. This is, if you want to really know the true nature of an organization, you try to change it. You don't go and look at its annual reports, its organizational structures. You don't go and talk to its leaders. You try to change it. That's when you get to know its true nature. Now, I want to say that, as time goes on, once you've done something the first time, there is this sort of efficiency that grows in the process. And the institution's since done hundreds and hundreds of light-related projects, and it's reduced in complexity. So I'm not saying here that Harvard is a lost case and doesn't know how to change light bulbs. What I'm saying is that any organization, when it's embarking on a change process, reveals a variety of institutional disconnections, barriers, cultural traits, and whatnot, that in itself makes change very difficult. So this is a fairly universal trend that we find not just in relation to operations but also curriculum. We surveyed almost 200 faculty that this team of Jeff and Daniela, Elizabeth, we got a grant from the federal government in Australia to literally find faculty that had successfully led curriculum change for sustainability and ask them all about what was it like to be a change leader. What did it take for you to successfully lead change? What can we learn from you about change and the process of getting it to happen? And one of the things we asked them was, give us a metaphor that explains what it's like to be you. And these are consistently the types of metaphors that came up. I'll just let you have a read through those. So you get the tone of it. The tone is literally somebody who's, drowning in complexity here. So this is the universal experience of local leaders. These are not the executive function leaders. These are people like us who are in these organizations trying to drive change. So it's a universal experience that bringing about change in our organizations is a mammoth marathon enterprise. So when we got these findings, we went and shopped them around with another 500 people in various conferences and workshops, and one of the immediate reactions that we got over and over again was, it's not just me that feels like this. A lot of us feel really alone in this struggle, this battle with our organizations, and we can tend to personalize that experience. It's just me, it's just my organization. Well, it's actually a universal characteristic, and it's a symptom of the incapacity of our organizations to meet the challenge of the day. Our organizations fundamentally are not change capable in the way that they need to be. So then the burden is falling upon individuals to just suffer their way through this marathon effort, which itself is not a viable path for us. We are not going to change the world by waiting for people who are willing to be Tonto at the Lone Rangers convention. There's just not enough of us out there to do that. So the research itself, there are a lot of other findings that it brought out. What it revealed very clearly was our organizations are not capable of the kind of change they need to be capable of, and we started to drill down into what would it take for our organizations to have that kind of change capability. Well, the art of change itself is really a leverage game. It's about finding where your where your efforts can have the most impact in these organizations. If you're very unstrategic about your efforts, you will get lost in the weeds and you'll probably never be seen again. So it comes down a lot to learning how to be more strategic, but it also comes down to understanding that the change agent and the role of the change maker or the change leader is first and foremost to reduce risk and instability so that others can lead. And we have collectively inherited the assumption that change is hard, change doesn't happen because people are just innately averse to change. It's actually not true. People thrive on change. There is actually a latent human desire for creativity, for change, for adventure. It sits there within us. Very few of us want a routine life where we know exactly what's going to happen every day. Most of us want to feel that we are growing, that we're evolving, that we're part of something meaningful and dynamic. So the key focus then has to be removing risk and instability, and the degree to which we are successful in removing that risk and instability in the organizational context is directly proportional to the amount of change that then becomes possible for these organizations. So in order to do that, though, we need to really understand how are our organizations working. They're certainly not working in the way that they have us believe they are. There's a lot of research and sort of, thinking that's been out there analysing organisations, and there's kind of this quiet consensus that, well, large organisations, they have an amount of dysfunction to them, they have an amount of irrationality to them, and we just need to live with that. And I think what we're understanding now is that a lot of that apparent irrationality actually has its own logic, and there are a lot of patterns that can be understood and worked with a lot more effectively. Now, to get at those, we need to look at the whole, what I call the whole organizational ecosystem. So in your organization, you have the infrastructure, our buildings. You can only go so far with driving, say, the green building agenda before you run up against the need to change some of the planning processes, the need to change the organizational systems, which are less visible, but they encompass they set the boundaries of possibility around anything you can do at the infrastructure level. So you can only go so far in changing the infrastructure before you actually are called to change all of this. And you can only go so far in really trying to get people to support changes in any of these areas before you're having to reconcile some fairly interesting and sometimes quite complex social dynamics, issues of group dynamics, relationships, the way in which people are responding to preserve their own standing and status in the organization, anything to do with that human relational sort of context has to be kind of resolved successfully in order to build enough support and consensus for these kinds of changes. And of course, to build that social, to foster those positive social dynamics and get that social alignment where people are feeling safe socially, they trust in this process, they're feeling empowered within themselves, they feel that this is not threatening to them, that their status is well taken care of. In order to do that, you are then being pulled into contact with people's personalities and how they view themselves in the organization, and some of their own innate capabilities and habits, values, and traits. So the process of bringing about change in the organization really has you in a bit of a dance between these different arenas. Sometimes the key work has to be in changing some attitudes at the level of the individual. Sometimes it's really resolving a breakdown in trust or putting in place the right sort of social lubricant so that people are not responding in a defensive way but are engaged and empowered. Sometimes it's really about getting the structures, processes, and systems aligned, and sometimes it's a pure technology and design dilemma. So it's a dance around this overall ecosystem. This irrationality that we see and that puts a lot of us off is really simply the intersection of these three aspects of the organization's life. And of all of these, this is the one in which we lose the most ground and we have the most potential to really succeed in driving our organizations forward. So to talk about that for a minute, what we're talking about here and the neuroscience that's coming out is super helpful. In the workplace, the brain is experiencing it first and foremost as a social system. Now, what the hell does that mean? It's really, people are very preoccupied with we are preoccupied with our standing in the social context in which we find ourselves. And a negative social experience is registered so powerfully as to be almost equivalent to a physical blow. And we have over time evolved to have this incredible degree of social sensitivity and social attunement. And in order for us to really mitigate the negative threat response that can be generated socially, we have to do an amazing job at addressing these kinds of traits and qualities in interactions between people in our organization. These social qualities. People's status is incredibly important, and we are all sort of working to preserve our status in our social context, offering people enough certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness, and creativity are all the key conditions to really fostering empowerment and engagement and unleashing an enormous amount of human creative potential. So in our day-to-day meetings, this is not generally attended to very well. There have been sort of some a truce made in a sense where a lot of our organizational processes certainly they don't mean to be negative in these areas, but what they're failing to do is they're failing to be very proactive in designing engagement processes that really cater to reducing everybody's threat response so that they can remain fully engaged. Now, I want to just do a quick survey of you. Who in this room would say that a significant percentage of the meetings that they have do a fabulous job at sort of really attending to these dimensions, so that you personally feel that you're never really having to guard yourself in these kinds of ways? I don't know if that was a well-framed question. Was it? Okay, so you all really, right. Okay, let's reverse the question. Who spends a significant percentage of meetings that you engage in do a poor job of really managing these aspects? Okay. Yeah. And so let's talk about that. What are the ramifications of that? What happens? What are we losing? Like, just fire out some ideas.
Number 6, you're losing the creativity.
Losing creativity? Yeah.
Nothing gets done because you're triaging all those things.
Nothing gets done because you triage, so a lot of your reserves are spent on managing that.
Lack of engagement.
Sorry? Productivity?
Lack of engagement.
Lack of engagement?
You're not doing brainstorming well.
Not brainstorming well, so not enough to encourage.
Lack of relatedness between
Relatedness.
regular staff and other administrators.
Yeah, so barriers are up, disconnects are sort of in there. Yeah. So what's wildly exciting to me about this stuff is that in difficult financial times, to really go at this stuff, we're not talking about millions of dollars here to kind of do a better job in our organizations. What we're talking about is just shifting our awareness, putting conscious effort into something different, and maybe investing extra time into attending to these dimensions to unleash a new level of creativity, empowerment, engagement, brainstorming capacity, and diffuse some of the kinds of barriers that are in play. This is huge potential for us organizationally to focus on doing this better. and unleashing what might come of that. And it is one of the intrinsic elements of when you ask, well, what does it look like to operationalize effective grassroots engagement? It looks like doing a much better job at this for a start, for everybody involved, from executive function to grassroots. What else does it look like? Well, we know from the research, only about 5% of what we do at any time is consciously derived. The rest is from habit and sort of responding from stimulus around us. So a good percentage of that unconscious activity is organized around these social needs that we have. So getting those social needs met effectively is remarkable, will unleash a remarkable amount of potential in the organization. And the best way to do that is not to sit down and talk people into feeling good about their status. It's actually to give them experiences, positive experiences, where they feel that the group process, they feel that meeting process, or even that exchange with you, they are having an experience in which all of those social needs are being met, freeing their reserves up to be engaged with you and with the group in a really productive, creative, effective way. You give people those experiences and they come back for more because we're all hungry for that. That is much more in tune with our innate interests and potentials. So attending to the way in which we facilitate and design group processes is huge. There's a huge well of potential there for us in driving sustainability into our organizations. And one of the outcomes, I think, to your point, is really group intelligence can be radically increased. And in a sense, wider organizational intelligence can be unleashed. We can shift all of the cognitive resources we're putting into just trying to survive socially into driving innovation, into supporting the change process itself. And there's research that talks about the difference between groups that are not functioning with high degrees of group intelligence. Some groups function with lower levels of intelligence than the most intelligent person in the group. So you may as well have disbanded the group and just given that person the role to figure it all out. Other groups are able to coalesce and achieve a level of group intelligence that's beyond any one person's capacity in that group. And these are the kinds of traits that turn up in this research. This capacity for social sensitivity is exactly what we're talking about. If you can attend to those social needs, you're freeing the group up to function at this higher level, sharing the conversations, which is a really concrete way of ensuring that contributions are synthesized from everybody, and having more women in these groups brings both of those other qualities in a higher level. And we know even from the corporate sector that this emphasis on bringing system-wide collaboration and really breaking through these barriers and boundaries, the leaders from corporate sector and other sectors, these are executive leaders, they are appreciating that when it comes down to sustainability, the longer they have contact with that leadership demand, the more A, they're able to see financially beneficial efforts that they can get behind, but B, they're able to understand that the capacity to collaborate, the capacity to really enhance group intelligence in the organization becomes more and more obvious and important to them. So I'll wrap up with this last piece of data from this group effort. So we asked our 200 faculty, what are the leadership capabilities that you yourself, in your work, felt were most important to your success? And we had them group those capabilities according to these personal or interpersonal, cognitive, or basic knowledge-based competencies. And we ranked them. There were 46 of these capabilities. These were the top 10. So these 200 faculty, having energy and passion and enthusiasm for what I do is most important. And that's kind of obvious because if it's so hard to get anything done, The only reason why you're going to keep working at it is because you're passionate and because you really have that drive to keep coming at it. It gets really interesting after that, being willing to give credit to others. That was like number 2. Now that is a countercultural sort of trait to higher education, where a lot of the incentives here for a faculty member, the incentives are to accrue credit for your efforts to advance and to move towards tenure and whatnot. Empathizing and working productively with others, so empathizing, being honest, being true to my values, being creative, listening, understanding my strengths, limitations, learning from my own errors and processes, and learning from experience. So of these kinds of capabilities, the vast majority of them are personal and interpersonal capabilities. They really speak to social intelligence and emotional intelligence, that capacity to listen, foster relationships that have trust and a real kind of vibrant two-way exchange to them. Now we also asked this group, well, to what extent does your university recruit on the basis of these kinds of leadership capabilities? And I think you all know the answer. Maybe not at all, really. And we also asked them, well, to what extent do they advance you, promote you, or train you in relation to these capabilities? A little bit more on that, but still extremely low. So we came out with that finding that it's another sort of finding that in order to create a change-capable culture, you do need to populate your culture and organization with people that have these kinds of leadership capabilities, that have that social sensitivity, that have these types of skills and wares. So it's an opportunity, and a very high leverage one, to really engage in changing selection processes in the organization. Now I want to just quickly, the last point here was back to this leadership system idea, that ultimately to really operationalize this grassroots engagement, we're going to have to be innovative around our governance and design processes and our decision-making processes, so that the work of thinking about what we're going to do is connected more with learning by doing, so that this separation that currently exists between the intellectual enterprise of deciding on strategy and setting direction is now fused much more successfully with the work of actually testing it. So the leadership system here needs to be designed into decision-making processes from the beginning. And that is that's like, it's an abstract art in a way. How do you kind of build a decision-making process that does that? But it actually is something that you can convene people around to think about. That you almost have charrettes to say, if we have a strategic plan, which I think you do, maybe we need a number of governance structures and decision-making processes built for purpose to really enable the whole leadership system to be very effectively engaged and sequenced in a process of pilots, learning by doing, authority to kind of give people more confidence, reduce their sense of risk, and middle management engagement to kind of really institutionalize the right incentives and scale up what's proven to work at the small scale level. So I'll end there. It's a very exciting area for us to think about, and the difference here is that we get stuck pretty early when we think about, when we're engaged in trying to win the battle to let's get the next green building supported, we run straight up against finance reactions. This area of let's think differently about governance structure, decision-making processes, social dynamics, there's not a huge budgetary consequence to that. There is one, but the potential benefits are so enormous for the scale of the investment that it would take that I think it's a very opportunistic time to be shifting some of our focus to these kinds of battles in our organizations, particularly in these times where money is just almost a dirty word to ask for. So I will end there, and if there are any last questions or comments, please fire away. And out of respect for your time, if there aren't, we can leave. So are there any other comments or questions? No? Great.
Thank you.
I hope you're all aware we do have a reception following this. It's over at the Latino Cultural Center, essentially next door, first low-level building to the south. And that is being kindly sponsored by FGM Architects. And so we thank you for your support. There's information, and Ed Chocolate is here if you have any questions for him. And thank you to him.
I would give the PowerPoint to Cindy if anybody wants it, or if you have a USB remote. Good luck, fellow travelers.